Günaydın, FCC'de hoş geldiniz. Unfortunately, that's the end of my Turkish, but it's the beginning of a very interesting session, I'm sure. Our guest today is Ambassador Bülent Meriç from Turkey. He's been stationed in Tokyo for about 1 year, yes, in 2014 he came, but he actually has been here many years before, working at the embassy before. So he can compare the Tokyo and Japan of today to the Japan of many, many years ago. Before coming to Tokyo, Ambassador Meriç was ambassador to Ukraine and Singapore. That should be quite interesting too, to have a comparison there. But he will talk mainly about the volatile situation in the Middle East today. And he told me in the ante-room that the view of Turkey doesn't always correspond with the view of the international community, which is probably understandable if you sit right next to it and you feel the effects of the region much more closely than if you sit in Brussels, Washington, or wherever. So, without further ado, I want to give the word to Mr. Ambassador Bülent Meriç.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Before I start my speech, I would like to accentuate how privileged I am to be invited to the Foreign Correspondents Club of Japan. Thank you very much, Patrick. You just summarized my CV, but there is one important point. I am the only Turkish diplomat who had the chance to serve both in Iran and in Israel, as I'm going to talk about the Middle East. Ladies and gentlemen, I picked up this subject matter because I saw that the Japanese public opinion, especially after the unfortunate killings of the 2 innocent Japanese citizens in Syria, is very much interested in the Middle East, the dynamics of the Middle East. And equally, I realized that there is a gap of information in this country as regards that particular region. So my intention in this 20 minutes time given to me is just to pass on to you my government's viewpoint on these events, on these developments in our immediate neighborhood. Previously, I addressed the Japanese press club, and there I mentioned that the international political system is in a phase of transition. There is fluidity. And this fluidity is very much felt in our neighborhood. We see that 2 geopolitical orders are unraveling in our immediate neighborhood. The post-Cold War entente with Russia and the borders in the Middle East defined in the after the First World War are now crumbling. And Turkey has to be vigilant of these important developments, because for a long time, Turkey has never been at an ease, in fact, but we were comparably in a comfortable situation in the period after the post-Cold War period. But after, the process which we call Arab Spring, which we approach very positively, because we thought that this process, following the democratization in Eastern Europe after the fall of the Berlin Wall, we took that this process called Arab Spring will bring democracy to our neighborhood, to the Middle East. However, this hasn't come to be true. This was a spontaneous movement, and the will for democratization used to come from the populace, But unfortunately, this positive process came to an end in Syria. And thereafter, after 2011, we see that proxy wars are taking place. The region which is called the Middle East, and this is termed by the British, Middle East covers Western Asia, excluding the Caucasus, used to be a very fragmented geography in terms of its social structure. But it is a very gifted geography as well, because it used to be the cradle of different civilizations. It has rich energy resources, and it used to be a center point of three continents, namely Asia, Europe, and Africa. So throughout history, the Middle East used to be a very important geography in terms of its geostrategic location. However, we see that nowadays this region is in fact lagging when we compare it with the other regions of the world. Let me give an example. In terms of the OSCE and World Bank figures, the population of the region, excluding the Maghreb, is 371 million people as of 2010. And it has the highest growth rate, that's 61%, in the years between 1990 and 2010. The population is rapidly growing. Whereas its share in the global GDP is only 3.9%, excluding oil and gas, natural gas. And its share in world trade is 1.8%, again excluding oil and natural gas. That means that this region is very much dependent on the energy resources in order to ensure its prosperity. I mean, we experience in this particular geography because the predecessor of the Turkish Republic, namely the Ottoman Empire, governed this geography for a long time. And after the collapse of the Ottoman Empire, that is following the First World War, the borders were drawn according to the interests of the colonial powers of the time, namely the Britain and France. The landmark agreement is the agreement that I mentioned earlier, that is the 1916 Sykes-Picot Agreement. And the borders were defined according to compromise reached at that time. When we talk about Syria or Iraq, I mean, there was no nationhood by the name Iraq or Syria. It is very much interesting because whereas in Europe the nations created their nation states, in the Middle East the states created their nations. I have just come across with a cartoon in today's New York Times, a camel with two heads and two humps. That is Iraq, and you can, use it for Syria as well. When you talk about Syria or Iraq, you talk about different tribes, different sects, different political trends, so on and so forth. When the Pandora's box was opened in Iraq and thereafter in Syria, we see that the fragmentation in those countries have become more visible. I'm not going to talk about in detail about what happened in Syria. Unfortunately, you know, what started as a democratization, process of democratization in Syria ended up as a proxy war. And this war brutally continues. And the vacuum created by this war, in fact, provided the bedrock of emergence of different undesirable groups, which is now we face in the name of ISIS or ISIL. The Japanese media uses the name Islam Koku, Islamic country, which is a very wrong terminology, because by naming them the Islamic State, first of all, the religion of peace and harmony, Islam, is tarnished. And secondly, a sort of legitimacy is given to this organization, whereas these people are not reflecting Islam at all. They are barbarians, they are brutal people. Therefore, in my address, I will use the terminology Daesh, which is an acronym of Al-Dawla al-Islamiyya fil Iraq wal-Sham. That is the Islamic State in Iraq and in the Levant. What created Daesh? Why Daesh appeared? Daesh roots can be traced to Tahwid and Jihad. This is a Sunni group which rose against the US and Iraq after the fall of Saddam Hussein in 2003. And Tahwid's leader, Abu Musab al-Zarqawi, was a Jordanian. And he had allegiance with Al-Qaeda, and he had the mission of creating Al-Qaeda in Iraq. So the origins of this group is Al-Qaeda. After Zarqawi was killed in the year 2006, following his death, Abu Omar al-Baghdadi took over and named this organization as Islamic State in Iraq, or ISI. And Abu Omar was killed 2010 and replaced by Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, who is the present leader of this organization. Al-Baghdadi is an interesting person. He's a doctor of Islamic law, graduate of University of Baghdad. He is a well-educated person. And he declared himself as the caliph of the Muslim world. In 2012, al-Bakr declared merger between ISA and al-Nusra Front. Al-Nusra is the affiliate of Al-Qaeda now in the region. However, Ayman al-Zawahiri, who is the leader of Al-Qaeda, disowned this merger and stated that al-Nusra was the only Al-Qaeda's affiliate in Syria. Therefore, there is no connection for the time being between Daesh and Al-Qaeda. I mentioned caliph. What is caliph? Caliphate is rather a Sunni concept. Caliph is a person considered a political and religious successor of Prophet Muhammad and the leader of the entire Muslim community. The Sunni branch of Islam stipulates that a caliph should be elected by Muslims or their representatives. However, Shia Islam believes that caliph should be an imam chosen by God from the Ahl al-Bayt, that is Prophet Muhammad's direct descendants. And the caliphate, in fact, came to an end after the collapse of the Ottoman Empire. So this gentleman, Abu Bakr, claims himself as the caliph of the Islamic world in order to garner support from Muslims all over the world. What caused the birth of Daesh? Why Daesh just came around? We take the view that Daesh is the result of the wrong policies of the international community, both in Iraq and Syria. Now let me talk about Iraq. In Iraq, after the fall of Saddam regime, the Sunnites, especially the Baathists, were marginalized. The new Iraqi army was restructured on a sectarian basis, and the presence of illegal Shiite militia groups were condoned. And discrimination against Sunnites reached its zenith during the Maliki administration. Mr. Maliki was the previous prime minister of Iraq. He was a Shiite, and during his tenure, he deliberately made all institutions, all state apparatus made up of Shiite elements. And, you know, both the United States and Iraq could not prevent Al-Qaeda infiltrate in Iraq. Al-Qaeda was there. And as I mentioned earlier, Al-Qaeda is the genitor of Daesh. When we talk about Syria, we see that the Syrian conflict enters its 5th year this year. A proxy war continues, and now the international community is very much focused on Daesh rather the future of Syria. Nobody talks about, you know, how this conflict will come to an end. And nobody talks about how the immense humanitarian situation could be resolved. So the political problem and its humanitarian dimensions are vested on the regional countries, and the international community is thinking of how to handle Daesh. That is the point where we are now for the time being. In fact, we should see the fact that this present situation plays in the hands of the brutal regime in Syria. Because so long as the international community is focused on Daesh, you know, Assad feels himself free to continue its brutalities in the other parts of the country. And he is not subject to criticism. The opposition forces, the moderate opposition forces, are still weak, and they need assistance. And so long as they remain weak, the vacuum in that particular country, especially the northern parts of that country, provides a fertile ground for the emergence of radical, fundamentalist religious groups. Now we come across with Daesh, maybe we will come across another fundamentalist group in the future, because there is a vacuum. There is no authority there. Therefore, the international community should give a renewed focus for the political resolution of the Syrian conflict, and also to the humanitarian dimensions of this conflict. I mean, today I read a news that the international community failed to deliver the $7.4 billion pledge expectations in Kuwait, and the pledging only reached $3.6 billion. It is short of what the United Nations expected. The third factor sustaining Daesh is Islamophobia in Western societies. According to CIA's estimate, there are around 30,000 fighters, of which 2,000 or 3,000 of them are from Western societies. In other words, 10% of recruitment to Daesh is from Western societies. And Turkey is highly criticized because of, giving free passage of these so-called free passage of these elements to Syria. But how can we control that? They enter the country as tourists and, transit the country and join the ranks of Daesh. This is a very complex situation. Therefore, the question should be addressed at its origin. And it is highly visible that the discrimination against the Muslim communities in the Western societies is one of the reasons of the increase of Daesh's ranks. Let me give some figures in that context also. So far, more than 12,500 people are registered on our list of restriction. More than 500 people are refused to enter Turkey, and more than 1,150 people are extradited to their countries of origin. So far as we receive intelligence from the countries of origin, our authorities take the necessary precautions blocking their passage to Syria. But this needs, a very fine-tuned cooperation with countries of origin. Now, how to solve this imbroglio? This is a very complex situation. In fact, Daesh is a strategic threat for the entire region, including Turkey. Turkey is part of the international coalition against Daesh, and we assumed responsibility specifically in the field of transfer of foreign terrorist elements. Fighting against Daesh requires a holistic approach, covering not only Iraq, but Syria as well. I may add to this Africa as well. Now we see that in Libya, in Mali, even in Nigeria, we see the presence of IS elements fighting against the legitimate order. Therefore, we need a holistic approach in fighting against Daesh. Secondly, in Iraq, the new Prime Minister, Al-Abadi, should be encouraged to take further steps for inclusiveness in all state institutions, especially in the Iraqi army. The Shiite militia should be dispersed. Now, lately, we got the news that Tikrit has changed hands and the Iraqi forces entered Tikrit. But we see that together with the Iraqi order, the Shiite elements also entered Tikrit. Tikrit is a Sunni city. So this sows the seeds of another conflict situation by letting the Shiite elements get into the Sunni areas. This is a very wrong approach. On the other hand, we know that Kurds play an important role in the fight against Daesh. However, we shouldn't lose sight that, Kurds have certain aspirations as well. It would be wrong to replace one with the other. I mean, so many people criticize Turkey as not giving priority to Daesh. We have many priorities. I mean, the West is faced with an equation with one unknown, whereas Turkey is faced with an equation of many unknowns. Therefore, you know, when the international community delivers military aid and arms to Peshmerga, we should be very much watchful also about the future. The Assad regime in Syria is the root cause of the chaos and extremism. I mentioned it earlier. And so long as this regime stays in power, security and stability in our neighborhood will remain elusive. The international community must give a renewed focus on the Syrian question. The international coalitions, air operations are not enough for bringing order in this geography. We believe that no-fly zones, safe areas, equipping and training of moderate opposition groups are essential parts of a swift and action-oriented strategy. The international community must also effectively address the humanitarian dimension of the conflict. It is unfair to confer the responsibility only on the countries of the region. We should see that the Syrian regime commits war crimes by implementing starve or surrender strategy. Now, nearly half of Syria's population is in desperate need of assistance. About 11 million people are in need of assistance, according to UN figures. There are 6.5 million IDPs, and the number of Syrian refugees in the neighboring countries exceed 3 million people. Turkey has received 1.7 million Syrians so far, and together with the Iraqi asylum seekers, the number of people that we provide heaven is more than 2 million people. So Turkey is the country providing protection for the biggest number of people in the world. Only 220,000 are residing in 22 camps. The others are outside the camps. And we have spent $5.3 billion so far for meeting the ends of these people. And we have received only $250 million. That's peanuts. So, ladies and gentlemen, this is the picture. The picture is unfortunately bleak. But we should not give way to pessimism. The developments in that particular region, in our southern neighborhood, needs a very carefully crafted international reaction. The United Nations should take the lead in devising this reaction by taking into consideration all aspects of the problem. And if it is not prevented, it may spread out to other regions, as we see in Yemen. Yemen is also witnessing another proxy war, and elsewhere. So we require a very urgent and very well-crafted action. I stop here, and I will receive your questions. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ambassador. Let me follow up on one point, because we're here in Japan. You called for the international community to support Turkey to provide for 2 million people. Japan accepts per year a handful of refugees. What do you expect from the Japanese side in this regard?
Well, we are satisfied of Japanese reaction to our calls for international aid. Lately, Japan has announced that the government will give $15 million this year for refugees. But this is not enough. We need more.
Okay, then I open the floor to questions. Please keep your questions short. Say who you are and who you work for, and one question each. Please, first one here.
Thank you, Ambassador, for coming today and for your insights. My name is Khaldoun Azhari, Pan-Orient News. I would like Pan-Orient News. It's for the Arabic media. And you mentioned that there's a proxy war in Syria. Could you please give us more details between who is running the show? And secondly, you gave some insights about Daesh roots. But there are a lot of reports in the Arabic media saying that Daesh is basically created by Israel or America, the conspiracy theory. And they show the Baghdadi as being former Mossad. There's a lot of such news. What do you comment on that? Thank you.
Shall we take a batch of questions or answer one by one?
Yeah, one by one.
Well, I mentioned, yes, proxy war. Yes, this is evident because, we see that, certain countries of the region are supporting the Assad regime, whereas certain countries are supporting the opposition groups. This is a very known fact. And even there are certain elements of neighboring countries fighting alongside the forces of the regime. I'm not going to name the countries, but this is very much evident. About the conspiracy theory, I am not in a position to say anything. We have a lot of conspiracy theories. Rather than getting into conspiracies, I think we should think about the present situation and how to resolve the situation. I'm not going to give way to conspiracies, but I mentioned in my statement that there were mistakes made by the international community, both in Iraq and in Syria.
Next, please. Yes.
Thank you, sir, for your presentation. I'm Craig again. I'm an independent consultant here in Japan. You mentioned before that one of the important keys to success, stability in Iraq, is more inclusiveness of the government. Now we're seeing Iranian elements from the Quds forces with General Soleimani, Hadi al-Ahmadi from the Badr organization in Iraq, and even Hezbollah fighting against Daesh. In your opinion, from your perspective, what is more destabilizing to the Middle East right now, Daesh or Iranian proxy wars, as well as in Yemen and Sudan?
May I? Well, your question is, do you like your father more or mother more? Both sides can provide a fertile ground for more conflict. That is what I want to say, because the Pandora's box has been opened. Now people in Syria, in Iraq, are, rather than thinking of their national identity as Syrian or Iraqi, they are thinking of their ethnic identity. In terms of their ethnic identity, they identify themselves as Sunni or as Shiite, as Kurd. This is very much dangerous. So this seeds fragmentation in this region, and there are intrusions from without. This is very much evident. If you write it, I read from your articles that there are intrusions from without. Therefore, there are all elements in that geography for having more conflicts or for having a more intensive conflict situation or for long-term conflict situation. So the antidote is to strengthen, first of all, democratization. Democratization is essential for both societies, keeping the territorial integrity and political unity of these two countries, and also ensuring inclusiveness in those two countries.
Okay, Shoel, please.
Yes, bonjour, Monsieur Ambassador. I'm Joël Legendre from RTL France and BFM TV. I think we met with the Saudi ambassador the
Yes.
other day. Europe refused your admission. Turkey is not accepted by EU, but you're going to provide through your gas pipe a lot of money to Europe via Greece with Turkish Stream and TANAP. So how do you think this is going to influence eventually your entrance into EU?
Why do you very much? You seem very much pessimistic. Turkey is not refused from the European Union. We are a candidate country. We are on negotiating terms with the European Union. You may be right if you say, the interest is dimming on both sides nowadays because of the positions of the two sides. But the process is continuing. We have a very rich and very mutually profiting dialogue with the European Union in the sphere of energy cooperation. We haven't opened up the energy chapter because of some political considerations, but the cooperation and dialogue continues with Brussels. And we take the view that this project that you mentioned, TANAP, would be very much profiting for not only Turkey, but for the European countries as well, as Europe will diversify its energy intake. And it will just solidify its energy security. Therefore, it is a mutually benefiting project.
When it comes to pipelines, one of the things which is happening is that not just Central Asia, but also Russia are looking for ways to get oil and gas to Europe around Ukraine. You used to serve in Ukraine. So is Turkey sort of the lucky winner from the conflict in Ukraine?
Well, some, yes, term that as such. Let me say that I served in Ukraine. Ukraine is a very interesting country. It's a very dynamic country. It has a very, it has a developing but a very rich democracy. As a frontline state, of course, Ukraine is in a very difficult situation. It has to follow a very balanced foreign policy between Russia and the Western, the European Union, the Western community of nations. And this is the destiny of all frontline states. Turkey is also a frontline state, if you consider it with different considerations, especially cultural consideration. We always supported the territorial integrity of Ukraine. We are against the annexation of Crimea. We are against the warfare in the eastern parts of the country, and we are looking for an amicable solution of this question. But on the other hand, Russia is a very important partner of ours. We are destined to cooperate with Russia because of our history and because of our geography. We need Russia and Russia needs Turkey. That is another factor as well. The decision to change the southern stream and to rename that stream is Russian choice. We didn't volunteer for that. It was proposed by Russia, and we positively reacted to that because we are in need of energy, and wherever it comes from, we have to ensure our energy security and feed our industry by using different resources. So that serves Turkey's interests as well. In fact, Turkey receives its energy from different sources, from Iran, despite the sanctions imposed on Iran, from Russia through Blue Stream. Now, TANAP is another project. If realized, it would just bring the resources of Shah Deniz, of Caspian, to the European markets and to the Turkish market. And the South Stream, if realized, would be another source for not only Turkey, but for South Europe as well. So I think it also serves the European interests.
Aaron, please.
Good afternoon. Aaron Sheldrick from Reuters. The nuclear talks between the West and other parties in Iran are hanging in the balance right now, with some hopeful signs. Do you think a deal, a successful deal, which would potentially bring Iran back in from the cold, so to speak, would have a positive influence on the Syrian conflict, in particular with Daesh? Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. In fact, in my presentation, I failed to mention that among the negativities in that region, another negative point is the rapidly arming this region is a place where, arms purchases are increasing year on year, and weapons of mass destruction exist in that region, and it increases. So Turkey is always in favor of having a region without weapons of mass destruction. In fact, during these talks, Turkey has been instrumental at a certain point in having these talks continue. We played the role of facilitator. In fact, we were one of the partners who delivered the Tehran Accord in the year 2010. So our purpose is, to come to a mutual a compromise between P5+1 and Iran, and to ensure that Iran's nuclear program is geared for peaceful purposes only. Definitely, if these talks reach that conclusion, it will just give a very positive atmosphere for the region. And that may also help finding some political solutions to the questions existing in that region. But so far, we don't know, how these talks are evolving, and what will be the outcome of these talks. But definitely, we support these talks.
Michael?
Michael Penner, the Shingetsu News Agency. My question is a little bit more historical, and it's related to Japan. In January, of course, there was the Kenji Goto and Haruna Yukawa issue, and it was reported in the media at that time that Turkey knew basically the locations of the two hostages during the entire crisis, and that this was the source for the Japanese government, that they knew where they were being held, and that had they been released, it probably would have been on the Turkish border. My question to you is, during, looking back at what happened in January, what kinds of things were the Japanese government requesting of you, and what kinds of help were you able to give them at that time? Historical question.
Believe me, there are many points that I don't know. What I know is that, we helped the government of Japan to the best of our abilities in order to ensure that these two Japanese citizens are freed and taken to Turkey. We used all channels for that, but we did not succeed. We had a very fruitful cooperation with the government of Japan, and on several instances, I heard that the government is very much thankful to Turkey for its efforts. That's all I can say to you. Ambassador is raising his hand.
Yes, please, Factor.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. I was very impressed by your presentation. Khalil Hassan, Ambassador Bahrain. There's a discussion about U.S. strategy in the region, that U.S. wants the region to deal with their problems. And there is discussion about a balance of power, where this balance of power will look after the conflicts in the region without any of them will be hegemony in them. And they are talking about Turkey, Iran, Saudi Arabia, and Israel. What do you think about this idea? Thank you, sir.
Yeah. Well, it's a very difficult question, Ambassador. Our preference is not, foreign intervention, balance of power, so on and so forth. We don't need that. I mean, we should leave the region to the regional countries, to the countries of the region. In fact, when we opted to support the Arab Spring, when it started, we had the idea that, democracy will just come to this region, people will come more connected with each other. The borders, as I defined, artificially drawn, would just become loose borders, and there would be cooperation between the regional countries, like the European Union, and prosperity will prevail in that region. We had that viewpoint in the year 2010 when we supported the Arab Spring. And we still harbor that feeling. We wish this region prospering in peace and harmony that includes all regional countries, with loose borders, with intensive cooperation, and economic prosperity. We take the view that intervention from without makes matters worse.
In your discussion of the Middle East, you've left out so far one player, which normally nobody forgets when we talk about the Middle East. It's Israel. Turkey has a very, how shall I say it, peculiar relationship with Israel. You used to be very, very close. At some point, the things went strongly downhill after the Mami Marmara. Where do Israel and Turkey stand nowadays, and how can they influence the region?
Unfortunately, our relations are at a low ebb, but that doesn't mean that we are against the existence of Israel. We value the presence of Israel, the reason why we cannot just improve our relations with Israel is the present policies of the Israeli government. In particularly their attitude vis-à-vis the Palestine, vis-à-vis Gaza, and also their settlement policies. So the present policies of the government of Israel is not helpful of the ideal of creating two states in that region.
Yeah, Aaron first and then.
Another nuclear question, but slightly different one. This week, Turkish Parliament approved the deal for the second nuclear plant, awarding it to the building of the second nuclear plant, awarding it to a French-Japanese consortium. Given the well-known failings that led to the Fukushima nuclear disaster, has Turkey sought any special assurances or information from the Japanese government about the disaster in the negotiations that led to this agreement? Thank you.
Interesting. In fact, before seeking additional assurances, the Japanese government gave us the additional assurances. I mean, the Japanese side is very much meticulous. Now we will set on carrying out the feasibility studies, and the feasibility will be done everywhere, on land, on seabed, environmental feasibility. You know, I cannot name. You know, there are 10 aspects of feasibility, and we were also assured that the technology to be used would be the top-notch technology. So we need nuclear energy because we are not an energy-rich country, and we are a rapidly industrializing country. So our aim is to give 5% of our energy mix to nuclear energy. That's the reason we embark on constructing nuclear energy plants. We rely on Japan, and we are confident that they would just do their best to deliver.
What makes you confident that you will get this support in the long run? Because if you build a nuclear power plant, it will run for 40 years or so. Japan has already once decided to exit nuclear power. It re-entered, sort of. The future of the Japanese nuclear industry is not very clear. What makes you confident you will have the backup, the support for 40 years?
Well, nuclear energy is a clean energy. I just lately listened to the speech of the future Director General of the International Energy Agency, where he said that, in the future, all industrial countries will need to rely on nuclear energy, despite its shortcomings. And I personally think that in the future, Japan will need to rely on nuclear energy also. I mean, Japan is passing through a transitionary period now, checking its energy infrastructure, nuclear energy infrastructure. But once, they become confident, I think they will again go to nuclear. But the share of nuclear energy in the general energy mix will be less than before. So if we want to industrialize, to progress, then we need new energy resources.
Good. We have a question up here.
Thomas Sullivan, Ambassador, thank you. My question is related to energy as well. As you said, Turkey is an energy poor country. You have supplies of coal. You don't have any supplies of smaller supplies of oil and gas, but you've become very reliant on Russia and Iran. So I was just wondering, to what extent does that complicate your relationship in the region? You're very reliant for oil on Iran and oil, gas, and coal on Russia. And also, I would like you, if you could comment on the fall in the oil prices. To what extent do you think this could further destabilize the Middle East or countries in the Middle East that are very reliant on oil and gas?
Thank you. As I mentioned earlier, we are diversifying our energy resources. At the same time, we are changing our energy mix. We want to lessen the role of fossil fuel in our energy mix and give a place to nuclear energy, to renewable energy, and also coal energy. We are willing to develop our infrastructure in coal also. The coal that we produce is not a high-quality coal, but we also rely on Japanese technology. And we are working with some Japanese companies in developing environment-friendly coal. We know that relying on one or two sources is not enough for energy security, and we embark on diversification. This is one point of your question. The second point is, the fall in oil prices is a welcome development. I mean, for everybody, because the prices just artificially went up too high in the financial turmoil period. I think this is a healthy development, and this helps Turkey as well. We give current account deficit around $40 billion annually, and the overwhelming part of our deficit is from energy purchases, energy resources purchases. So this helps countries like Turkey in making efforts for developing their infrastructures and also providing social services. It helps our budgets. This is my personal view. Thinking this issue in terms of the regional countries, I think it's also healthy. I mean, they should rely on other resources as well. I mean, the resources are not infinite. At one point, it will come to an end.
Okay, we have time for one question at least. Oh, Khaldun, yeah, please.
Thank you again. Khaldun Azhari, Panoramic News. Mr. Prime Minister
Erdogan.
Abiy. It seems he has a very special relationship with Turkey to the degree that he started developing tanks with Turkey. So, but the deal to develop jointly tanks didn't go through. Do you have some reasons for that? And the Japanese said you want to use it with other countries or share technology. Do you think Turkey needs to be more cooperating with Japan in terms of military export arms? Thank you.
Well, we cooperate with Japan so far as Japan is willing to cooperate. So in terms of defense cooperation, of course, this tank issue, it seemed that Japanese side wasn't very much willing to cooperate. So we started looking for other resources. The relations are excellent. There is cooperation in every field. So the level of cooperation will be very much dependent on the will of the two states on cooperate.
Okay. Any more questions? We still have 2 minutes, so take your chance. Yes, please.
Just a sort of looking to the future question. Obviously, as you said, sorry, Joan Anderson, I work with Sokogake International. I'm just interested in terms of what you were saying about the ideal you were hoping to see develop out of the Arab Spring movement, whether you see any possibility for sort of getting youth from different countries in the region together to really try to think long-term, think in a more positive way. There are obviously so many tensions and difficulties, but whether there are any initiatives like that to because all the countries in the region have so many educated, talented young people.
Well, the regional countries should encourage their young people to get in contact with their counterparts, indeed. As I mentioned earlier, this region is lagging, very much lagging, as compared to other regions, especially Europe. I mean, we envy the European Union. I mean, in the European Union, everybody gets in contact easily. And this develops synergy. Why not in the Middle East? You know, the culture, we have cultural affinity with the countries of the region. We have historic relations. And even for some of them, we share the same language. Why not we just loosen the borders, which were, you know, forcefully drawn after the First World War and just kept as it is for a long time? I think this will bring peace to that region, to the Middle East, and we should give a serious thought to this. I mean, especially the civil society institutions should give a very serious thought to this.
Good, thank you very much. We've come to the end of this session today. Thank you, Mr. Ambassador, for coming. Thank you, everybody, for coming. We have a little present for the ambassador. Being an ambassador, he's already an honorary member, so a double honorary member doesn't exist here. So we have a little present for you, and thank you very much for coming, Mr. Ambassador.
Thank you very much for you.